In this try it out activity, we're going to be practicing doing dynamic memory allocation. And we're going to pick two important ways to do this. One, both of them have to do with not knowing how many. So the first function is we're going to write two functions. Both of them do kind of something similar to start with. What they get is an input file name and an output file name. And then everything happens within the function itself. So inside the function, you need to create the output file stream that goes with the output file name and an input file stream that goes with the input file name. And then you're going to, in the first one, let's get to that. So that's kind of what they look like. So there's see, they both have those file names, one for input, one for output. And the first one, what it's going to do is it's going to create an array exactly the right size. So it's going to read from the file integers.txt, and this could vary. It should be able to read from anyone, but that first value is how many integers are in there. Now, it doesn't count itself. That number just lets you know how many integers are in there. And so once you know that, then you're going to dynamically allocate an array just that size, right? So this is a way to dynamically allocate an array. So you'll just use a pointer. You'll have it you'll allocate the array, save that pointer, and use that pointer as just like you would an array name, right? So that's the first one, and what it's meant to do is to dynamically allocate that array and then loop through it and fill it up with those integers. And then after you get it all filled up, you can close the input file and then loop through that array using that pointer to compute the total and the average and write that to the screen. Now, something you might want to pay attention to is that you actually open the output file clear up here. And that is because when you're testing it, remember when you open an input file stream, you need to verify that it works. And if it doesn't work, if it fails to open, then you want to let the system know, because you can't do anything if the file doesn't open, right? So when that happens, you're to write the unable to open file shutting down ... to the output file. And that's why it's opened here first, is so that you can write that error message and then shut the function down, because it no longer needs to continue if it can't open that. If it does open that, then you'll go ahead and read from the file, close the input file, and then later, then in the output file, you're going to output the number of integers, the total, and the average that was computed. So that's what needs to be done there. And then delete the dynamically allocated array and close the output file. So it's all listed there in order. It's also in the using pointers.cpp file. So those comments of what to do are right there, and you just do them in order. So put the instructions, put the code right after the comment. So you'll be adding code after each comment, and that'll keep everything in line. The other part of this assignment that's kind of a big deal is for you to be aware of that this is really an academic exercise, that there are different ways to do it. So this has been intentionally designed for you to get experience working with dynamic memory. You know, how do you manage a pointer that points to an entire array? How do you dynamically allocate an array? And then how do you clean up that memory? So that's the purpose of the activity, and doing it some other way won't satisfy that purpose. So to get credit for this assignment, doing it as outlined is actually critical. And even though you could pass the test doing it some other way, we'll be reviewing that your actual code to make sure it was done as specified. The second method is the write cartons, and again it receives file name for the input and a file name for the output. But this time we're going to manage it a little bit different. We're going to declare a vector of carton pointers. Now a vector can expand, right? It comes empty, and then you can just keep expanding it for however big it needs. So we don't care about how many pieces of carton data there are. That's not going to be a big deal. But we're going to make it a vector of carton pointers. So we won't actually create any cartons to start with when we create that vector. So then we're going to loop through the file and read the carton data. Now when you're doing that, when you're reading that carton data, you need to have variables to store the data, right? And so here's what it looks like. It just has, for each carton, there's 3 values. right? Then that's the three sides of the values. So you're going to read those in. You'll need a place to store those. So have variables that you can read them in and store them. And then you create, with those variables, you can create a new carton object and store that pointer back in the vector. Then close the input file, and loop through the array, and then close the input file. And by the way, go ahead and write that same error message out to the input file if it doesn't open. And then when you're done, loop through the vector and write the cartons to the output file. Now this time you're going to use something different, right? You're going to use a different method for writing it, where it just has the carton data in it. But when you print it out, you're going to be using another method that prints out. You're going to use the write carton, and that prints it out differently than just the data. And so that has you loop through then and access those pointers. And then finally, you're going to be deleting that memory. Now notice it's a different thing to delete the array that was dynamically allocated and to go through a vector and delete the individual carton objects that were created. So that's what this assignment is all about, is how to dynamically allocate memory, how to use pointers to manage that memory, and then how to delete it when you're done with it. Good luck.